Okay, so tonight's lesson is going to be the car section, applying answer choices to passages. And my name is Chris. I am one of the tutors here. So just a quick introduction and some useful links. Like I said, my name is Chris. I graduated from Stony Brook University with a BS in Applied Mathematics and Statistics, actually in 2019. I was working for the last 2 years, and in April, I took the MCAT and I got a 520 on it. So if you ever have any questions, you want any advice, anything like that, you can always reach out to me. I put my email here, and then I just put some other contact information for the group as well. So we have the GroupMe link over there. You can share that, use that. And the Instagram handle is @SocraticMed_ there too. And obviously this PowerPoint is going to be uploaded to the Google Drive afterwards, so you can always come back to it. So just to kick it off, I figured we could go over some advice, some tips for how to tackle the car section, specifically how to look at the passage and the answers. So just some general knowledge, you're going to have 90 minutes to read 9 passages and answer 53 questions. So it's really important that you keep your pace and you keep your attention focused, but you don't rush. So, I mean, I know we've all been in the situation where we're reading passages and you'll spend 2 minutes reading and then you just realize at one point, what did I just read? The trick is to not do that. You have to read and really focus your attention on what you're reading and process the information, because if you don't process the information of the sentence that you're reading, you're not going to understand the sentence after that or after that, and then you just wasted 2 minutes reading a passage that you don't understand. So I think a really big key is to be aware of your attention and to be aware of how you're focusing it when you're reading. So you can glance at the questions to get an idea of what it's asking before you read the passage, but really don't waste any time. So at this point, we've all taken a lot of standardized tests and we all know how well we can read and how well we can, understand and process information. If you're a fast reader and you like reading with an objective, then it might be a good idea to take maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds to glance at the questions first so that you're reading with an objective. If not, I would recommend just diving right into the passage. That's what I did. I scored a 129 on it. I don't like to look at the questions beforehand because I think it's wasting my time. But like I said, you know how you learn the best. And another suggestion that I have is to use the highlight feature, but use it wisely. Because if you don't use it wisely, it can be very time consuming, and it can waste some of your time. I apologize if you hear a dog whining in the background. That's my dog. So the things to highlight, try not to go crazy with it because again, it's going to be wasting your time, but you can look for tone, look for mood, look for any main ideas of the passage and look for any points of view. These are some pretty good jumping points when you want to look back and you're trying to find the content in the passage. Because a lot of the questions will also be inference questions. So these sorts of things are very good to keep an eye out for. So dealing with answer choices. So tips on dealing with tricky answer choices: beware of attractors, aka distractors. I'm sure you've heard of both names. You have to keep in mind that the people that write the MCAT are masters. They're masters at writing questions and they're masters at writing tricky answers. And they're going to put those tricky answers in there to distract you. So I just listed here some of these attractors that you might see. These are not all of them, but these make up a good amount of the questions that you might see, the answer choices that you might see rather. So the first one that I wanted to discuss was the half right, half wrong. So if any part of the statement is wrong, the answer choice is incorrect. That's pretty self-explanatory, but sometimes in practice, it's not as easy as you think. You have to, again, focus your attention on the question and make sure that every part of the question, if it's an and statement or an or statement, you have to make sure that the whole statement is true and that it fits the question. Opposites. The content may seem correct, but a negation is added or removed, like not or on. Again, it's just going to require you paying close attention to what you're reading. Sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes if you're not paying attention and you're trying to speed read and rushing through the section, you're not going to notice these kinds of questions. You're not going to notice these kinds of modifiers like the not on, any sort of negation that might be in there. So you have to really pay attention for those things and make sure you understand what you're reading and make sure that you're answering the question. Language tricks as well. A choice may have overly complex language, use absolutes, use superlatives, use them incorrectly to try to confuse you. So you may come across a question and you're reading down the answers, and one of the answers you read is just so complex, you read it 2 or 3 times and you're just thinking to yourself, what does this mean? That's the point of the question. That's the point of the answer. They're writing that to confuse you and to draw your attention. They hope that you read that question, that answer, have no idea what it means, and then choose it. So you really have to pay attention to that. Make sure you read all of the answer choices before you make your choice. And just try not to get bogged down by the language, because there will always be a right answer that makes sense. So again, you just have to review the questions. And then once you find that question that sort of makes sense, you can rule out that, tricky language answer choice. So correct information, incorrect question is another one that's super difficult, because the statement is going to be true, but it's not necessarily answering the question. And if it's not answering the question, it's not the correct answer. So you may come across an answer choice where you're reading it and it sounds right to you, but there's that little voice that's telling you it's not answering the question. So you should listen to that little voice and review the other questions, because you're going to find a better answer. It just comes down to the bottom line that if it's not answering the question, it's not the correct answer. And another one is outside knowledge. So most of these passages are going to be humanities and social sciences. And a lot of the times the passages will touch upon information that you learned in your pre-med requisites. And the MCAT question creators are depending on this, because one of the distractors is outside knowledge. So this section is not testing your general knowledge. While the background information may be helpful, all of your answer choices have to be supported by the passage. So if it's talking about history, or if it's talking about some sort of social science, like a psychological experiment, you can use the general background knowledge that you have of the subject to help you answer the questions. But the bottom line is that if your answer is not supported by explicit information that comes from the passage, it's not correct. So really keep that in mind. All of your answers are going to be based in the passage. And that's the good part of the cars section, is that all of the answers really are there. Right. And as Mark said, the tips apply to the passage-based questions on the other sections of the MCAT more or less. So keep them in mind during the other sections as well. These are really good strategies to use for all of the sections, because, obviously the other sections also have reading comprehension as well. Okay. So just a couple of more tips. Manage your time wisely. Practice makes perfect. You're not going to be able to manage your time and build stamina unless you're doing these practice questions. So to start, you can look at the passages individually without a time constraint, and carefully review the passages and questions. If you have a lot of time, like multiple months before your MCAT, you can definitely do this, just to sort of be familiar with the wording of the questions that they use, and just be familiar with what kind of passages you're going to see. Once you feel that you have a solid strategy down, though, you really need to add the time constraint and work on your pacing, because the pacing is the super important part. And it's going to be pretty much is going to be the deciding factor, at least for me, of how well you do in the cars section. You should really get those time constraints to be practicing a full-length time car section, I would say at least a few months before your MCAT, because you really want to be prepared for this. Practice makes perfect with this section, as with everything else. So you really just want to be prepared when you go in for test day. And the best way to do that is just to be doing these practice questions in an environment that's as similar to the test as possible.